Hello, my name's Hannah. Welcome back to my channel. We're going to be doing my January wrap up, and I'm just very excited to talk about the books that I've read. I'm filming this on the 29th, so there's still 2 days left of the month, so I could quite possibly finish more books, but if I do, I'll just talk about those in my next wrap up because I don't really want to wait. And I was already going to take off my makeup and then figured, like, let's actually film something. Let's make a use out of this. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. I'm going to talk about all the books that I read. It was a lot. I think I'm currently at 26 or 27 books. Will be, okay, sorry, my viewfinder's upside down right now, but okay. So the 27 actually means those are all books that I've read so far this month, so let's get into it. Oh, I just remembered that this would be the start of a new year. So I guess the first book that I finished this year, super bizarre, was Jade City by Fonda Lee, which is the first in the Greenbone saga, which is a fantasy, I think a modern fantasy set where more modern alternate world where jade, the jewel, gives you power, and the more jade that you have, the more powerful you are, but some people can't have jade, and there's families who kind of run the city. It was an interesting book. I gave it 4 stars. I did enjoy it. I liked the audiobook. I thought that it was very interesting. I think that I had maybe higher expectations for it that I don't want to say weren't met, but I feel like I maybe missed some things that other people saw from the book, so that was kind of just an interesting perspective. I did really enjoy this book. I don't know if I will continue on with the series. It's kind of an up in the air for me. And the next book that I read was Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the second book in the Brown Sisters trilogy. I gave this book 4 stars. I did also kind of flip back and forth for this one. I really liked our hero, the male love interest for this story. His name is Zafir. He works at a security guard in a like university building, and Danny, okay, I was like, what book is this? A lot of people have been talking about the Eve Brown book, and I'm just kind of feeling all over the place right now, but it's fine. Danny works in this building. She's doing her, I guess, graduate program to get her master's, if I'm remembering right. That's just the way that school works in my mind. But so she's doing that. They do a fire drill. She gets stuck in the elevator. He takes her out of the elevator, and they realize that they have kind of sparked some internet interest. They decide to fake date to kind of ride out the wave of their popularity because Danny wants a fuck buddy and Zafir runs a, I don't want to say charity, I can't think of the word, like a non-profit where he teaches rugby and kind of therapizes to some boys, and it was an interesting book. I did, like I said, give this 4 stars, but I think that Danny was very one track in the way that she viewed love, which you know going into it, but seeing how strongly Zafir felt for her the whole time and then her denial of that was just really hard to read. So it made it very, like, even more sad for me to read. But I will say, and this is something that I don't know if I often complain about it, but I do complain about it in my head, that it's always on the male love interest to do the big grand gesture to kind of bring them back together in the end. And I was glad that after the 3rd act breakup that Danny was the one to instigate it, to bring it back, to be the first one to apologize. And I really like that because I'm tired of the men having to do it when it's not always their fault. Not that it, you know, so it was just nice to see something that I've been looking for a long time. So that was nice. Then I read The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. I gave this book 3 stars. This is about a girl whose name I forgot. I also forgot the boy's name, so don't at me. But she is the second daughter, and her sister's just like perfect. So she grew up not perfect. She sleeps with men and kills them, and she decides that she's going to sleep with the king and get married to him and then seal his kingdom. So that's what happens. She doesn't kill him. They end up falling in love, but was just kind of for me. Maybe not my first Trisha Levenseller book. What was it? Oop, that was my ring light. The Pirate Queen, Daughter of the Pirate King books, I think she wrote. I might be wrong. But I did like those, I think, more than this. It was more fleshed out of a world, less weird than this one was. And I think this was just like a little bit too long for the fantasy romance that it's trying to be. It was just like a little bit too much for me, just a little bit too long. And I read This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Motar and someone else, Max Gladstone. So this is a very short novella about two female, female time travelers who are from like warring sides, and they send each other messages, pull like, I don't want to call them pranks because they're not pranks, but they figure out each other's plans and like foil them beforehand, and they fall in love like that. And so it's just kind of their story told in letters, and I really liked the narrators for this. So this one was a 4-star. I don't really remember a lot of it. I don't have a lot of thoughts as far as this one goes, so that's all I got. I did like it though. So the next book that I read was Well Played by Jen DeLuca, which is the second book in this like Ren Fair trilogy. And I am from a town that is pretty famous for its Renaissance festival. So even though I've never been to one, I am also a character performer. So this is a world that I'm not completely, what is the word I'm thinking of, separated from. Like, I can relate to a lot of this. I know that at least one person that I follow didn't like this book, but I gave it 5 stars. I loved this book. I had such an emotional reaction to it that I wasn't expecting, and I know I cried in the first one too. Also was not expecting that, but I really liked this one. We're following someone who was in the first book. I can't remember her name. She is Emily's friend in the first book, like her first friend that she meets at the fair, and she's kind of just seeing everybody move on without her. Her life kind of stagnant in the time that it's in. Her mother had a heart attack, so she went and moved back home and is now kind of stuck. She feels like if she moves, her mother will have another heart attack, and she doesn't want to be like the cause of this, even though she wouldn't be. She had a fling, I guess, with one of the band performers from the Renaissance Festival, emails him the last night, and then starts emailing back with his cousin. Doesn't realize it's his cousin. Kind of, they fall in love like that. So it is a catfishing story, but I think it's only maybe if half of the story, then half of the story. It does bring up a lot of drama, and I don't always love the drama in stories, but I did really like this one. I felt like I related to her a lot as I look at my cat. It was just like really good for me. Then I read The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, and I gave this one 4 stars, but this is another where I don't know if it did everything for me. I think it has potential, and I'll probably continue on with this series. I think all of the books are out, so it's not like I have to wait for anything. But this is, I believe, Eastern European folklore retelling where almost like, as if I could relate it to, well, no. So she has a stepmother who's very, very devoutly religious, but she lives in a town where, I don't, like demons, like minor demons live, and they help people. She can see these demons, and then a priest comes, and he's really creepy and weird, but then there's like a winter god. It was just kind of a lot happening, and I probably couldn't tell you anything aside from what I already told you. I think her name was, no, I don't remember the main character's name. I don't want to say something wrong and then be totally off, but I did like her as a character. It was just everyone else that I didn't really like. Then I read Famine by Laura Thalassa. This is the 3rd book in her 4 Horsemen series quartet. I think there's going to be a 4th book. I'm going to move this because I'm messing with it now. But it is what it sounds like. It's a dark romance story where the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse come to Earth and basically cause the end times, and we are on famine. So he was also dark. They're all pretty evil when they get down there, and then they meet a woman and they usually kidnap her, take her with them on their travels, and then they all fall in love. So that's what this one was, but this was 4 stars. All of the books have been 4 stars for me. I don't have anything bad to say. She was a very strong main character, very take no shit. The timeline kind of jumps as you are reading it, where it's like 20 years in between each of them, maybe. Yeah, I think so, because it's like 20 years after the apocalypse. So I don't know biblical terms, I'm sorry, but I really liked this one. I'm excited for the 4th one because there's been obviously a lot of build-up. Whenever you get to the last character in the series, there's a lot of build-up, but I'm just excited to see what happens for this one. Then I read The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. I gave this book 5 stars. This is the first Mariana Zapata book that I've read. It is somewhat similar to that Hugh Grant, Sandra Bullock movie where she's like his assistant and then she quits because he's kind of awful to her, and then he begs her to take him back because he realizes that he like needed her in his life. So that's what happens in this one, but it's also a marriage of convenience because he is Canadian, is Winnipeg in Canada. That is very far away from me, very far north. Yeah, they decide to marry so he can remain in the US, continue to play football. It's very interesting. Just a really good, really good slow burn. Very slow burn. Very slow burn. Another 5 stars, and this is going to start the books that I read for the historical romance readathon. I don't currently have the memory card that all of that footage is on, and it has been at least a week, almost 2, since that readathon started, a week since it ended, and I don't know when I'm going to get that camera or that SD card back, so I'm filming on a different one right now. Not that you notice or it matters, but don't currently have that one, so I don't know if that video will go up. Not that it was anything interesting, it just had all my thoughts in here, so I was like, oh, perfect. That's like 8 books that I could just skip through, be like, watch that video, but I don't know if that video is going up, so whatever. Doesn't matter. I read The Devil in Her Bed by Kerrigan Byrne, which is the last book in her Devil You Know trilogy. Very sad that it's over. I absolutely loved this series. I gave this book 5 stars. It was so good. So good. This is an arc. This book comes out in March, but it was so good. So we're following Francesca, who is basically trying to figure out who killed all of her family when she was very young, and now she's kind of an infamous like lady around town who sleeps with men, but she's trying to get information from them, isn't actually sleeping. She's drugging them and then stealing stuff from them to try to figure out what happened to her family. And then the male perspective is somewhat of he's a spy, more of a spy than the man in the second book, where you don't know who he is at the very beginning and they don't tell you who he is. I wish I had that vlog footage because I found out who he was. I was like, maybe it's this guy. And then I was right 2 minutes later because I'm so smart. I'm very good at picking up context clues. But yeah, this one was just really good. I don't want to spoil it too much because it's not out yet, but I loved this book. Okay, then I read her Wicked Marquess by Stacey Reed, which is the second book in the Sinful Wildflowers series. I gave this book 2 stars. It is somewhat similar to the book that I just talked about, but we have a wallflower who is engaged to a man her father's age by her parents. She doesn't want to marry him. She decides to try to ruin herself. So when the marquess, the male love interest, is seen leaving someone's window, she says, that was my window, even though it wasn't. He is searching for the person or group of people who killed his childhood love. He thinks that one of them is her brother, so he decides to let the ruse kind of continue, get close to her to see what she knows, what her brother knows. So I didn't really see any romantic connection between these 2 characters. This book really dragged on for me. I didn't like it at all, so I gave it 2 stars. Then I read The Princess Plan by Julia London. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. This is the first book in a series. This is about a completely normal historical girl in like the 1800s. Her sister and her run a women's gazette where they just gossip basically, and the male love interest is Prince. the prince's advisor is killed, and somehow our female main character is roped into it. They get together. It was very long, very drawn out, and another situation where I didn't really see them fall in love so much, so I didn't love this one. It was just 3 stars. I don't really have anything to say about this one because I didn't really like it, so again, I have nothing. For the next couple of books, these are not historicals, just kind of jumping back into just all the regular nonsense that I read. I read The Silence of Girls by Pat Barker. I gave this book 3 stars. This is a Odyssey retelling from the perspective of someone whose name I forgot. She was not Achilles' wife, but she was one of the women that he took slave and lived with him, and this was just hard to get through. And I've seen a lot of reviews from people saying that it's supposed to be about all of the women in the Odyssey and it's only about this one girl. And she talks a lot about being like the wartime and women being taken prisoner, and it was kind of hard to get through, and she wasn't a very likable main character, which isn't a requirement, but I also didn't like it, so this book was just 3 stars. I don't want to say it absolutely did not ruin the Song of Achilles or the Odyssey for me. If anything, it just, because it didn't garner those feelings for me, I just feel completely whelmed about it. The next book that I read was Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. I gave this book 5 stars. I don't really know why it took me so long to read this book, but I loved all of it. We're following, it's Georgie and Travis. Why am I so close? I'm so sorry. Georgie is the youngest daughter in her family. She is a party clown and kind of seen as the child. All of her siblings were somewhat grown when she was born, so everybody had their own lives, and she was kind of forgotten about. And Travis is a former pro baseball player. He comes back to town and everyone wants to just get his attention, whether sexually or emotionally, I don't know, but they decide to start up a fake relationship so he can clean up his image and she can show her family that she's an actual adult. But this was good. It was surprisingly steamy, only because it has one of those cartoon covers where you don't really know what you're getting, but this was very good. I did really like it, and I'm going to continue on with the series. So I read it. It only took me 2 years to read it, and I also owned it. So what else do I have to say? Nothing. Right, then I finished The Poppy War with the Burning God by Arv Kwong. I gave this book 5 stars. It was a good ending. I'm happy with the way that this ended. I don't have any bad feelings about it. Do I have a little bit of feelings about it? Not really. So kind of ambivalent about the way that this ended, to be honest, but that's okay. We're following Rin, who goes to a basically war school and learns that there are some people who are able to call the gods into their bodies, and so she does this in the first book. There's a lot of war. It's a very dark series, a dark fantasy series, but I enjoyed all of them. I don't really know how to talk about this with it being the 3rd book, but the ending did kind of, while it made sense to me, made me very sad, so that's what I have to say. Then I read The Archive of the Forgotten by A.J. Hackwith, which is the 2nd Hell's Library book. I gave this one 3 stars, even though I didn't really like it. So the first book was really cool. It's about Hell's Library, where all of the unfinished stories go. There's a librarian and her assistant. One of the stories gets out and goes to meet with his author, which is bad because the authors see this as their perfect creation and then kind of can't write after that, which is not what they want. So it's kind of a romp with the librarian, her assistant, this character, and then an angel. But in the 2nd book, they're kind of just dealing with all the repercussions from the 1st book, which was very boring to me, and I could tell immediately which the bad character was, which you couldn't really in the 1st book because they didn't make themselves very known, but this was just not it for me. And I'm sure it was trying to teach you lessons, but I was also not here for those. Unfortunately, this one just wasn't it for me. Okay, then I read A Notorious Vow by Joanna Shupe, which I gave 3.5 stars. This was the group book for the Historical Romance Readathon. This is about a deaf New York man in historical England. No, New York. Thank you, Hannah. And the marriage of convenience that he finds himself in after a 19-year-old British woman tries to hide from her family at his house, and then they're kind of forced into marriage. I had a lot of thoughts while reading this book, mostly about how I wanted the female main character to kind of grow a spine. She's completely spineless, which might have fit for how shitty her parents are and how young she was, but she was just annoying to me. It was interesting to read from the perspective of a deaf character, to have a romance with a deaf character. I really liked that, but there was a part at the end where he gets sent to an asylum that I thought could have been perhaps not in the book. So that's my thoughts. That's basically what I said in that recap, so there you go. The next book that I read was Brave New Earl by Jane Ashford, which I gave 2 stars. Oh, okay, so this is about a widower who has a son. He kind of, I don't want to say neglects, but like a little bit neglects, and his dead wife, sorry, her cousin comes because she hears from the male main character's uncle that he's being abused, and she was pretty heavily abused as a child. Neglected. There's no child abuse on page, just a little bit of PTSD remnants from it. So she comes, wants to take the baby away from him. He's 5. The kid kind of reminded me of Lucy from The House in the Cerulean Sea, where they're kind of just like chaotic little children. But she ends up staying with him and they fall in love, and I gave this 2 stars. The next book that I read, I absolutely hated. So this is Earl's Well That Ends Well, also by Jane Ashford, also in the same series. This is about the meddling fucking uncle from the first book and his very awful love interest. She is a painter from Spain during post-Napoleon war times. She was mean, she was awful, she was very rude, she was just bad, and I didn't like her at all. And supposedly she loves him at 45% in the book, when she's just been awful. I didn't see this at all. It bugged me. And also, these books, and I talked about this in my reading vlog, but I have to talk about it again now because I don't think that's going to go anywhere. But there's no on-page sex in this book, which is not necessary for me. I am a very open person. I can read almost anything and enjoy a lot of different things, but when I'm reading a romance and the relationship is a lot of being told, not shown, and there's a lot that I feel like I'm missing, it helps when you see them in like a very intimate situation where you can see their like physical feelings toward each other, and this just didn't happen, so that was shitty and bad, not for me. Then I read The Duke is But a Dream by Anna Bennett. I gave this one 2 stars. This is about a girl who, with her sister, writes a women's gossip magazine. She goes to drop it off one day and decides to, while dressed as a boy, go to a local pub, gets knocked out, taken to a duke's house, and then for 2 weeks she can't remember who she is. But it's hard for me, I guess. I've learned this about myself. When I know who the main character is, at the beginning, there was a chapter where you know who she is. She's a very strong person, very developed character in that amount of time as you could be. But then she forgets who she is, and you're like, I fucking know who she is. This is stupid. I don't care. I don't care about her not figuring out, because they didn't try to help her at all. So that was really annoying. But if it had been like in an Anastasia situation where she was, as a child, you don't really know her beforehand, learning that she was like a lost duchess or something, I can live with that. Amnesia, not for me. So I read Undressed with the Marquess by Christy Caldwell. I was really excited for this one. This is about a Robin Hood type thief who is discovered. He knows that he is the son of a duke, the grandson of a duke, and they find him because I guess someone else in their family dies, decide to pull him back into the circle. They find him after he ran away and want him to be a fancy man now. And they're like, you have to get married. And he's like, that's cool, I already have a wife. So she is just like a normal seamstress, thought that he was just a thief. They were married like 10 years ago, haven't seen each other since. He comes back into her life and is like, hey babes, guess what? I'm a marquess, so you have to come live with me now. And your brother will get to marry his girlfriend and everything will be fine. Which was like a really weird description. I'm sorry that I said it like that. I gave this book 3 stars. And my review was, I think this book was just too repetitive, which is true. You get to hear the same story a million times. So what I just told you, you get to hear it all the fucking time. The last historical that I read was The Lady Risks All by Stephanie Lawrence. I gave this book 2 stars as well. This is about a woman whose brother goes missing after she finds him in like a gambling hell. So she enlists the gambling hell proprietor in helping her find him. They spend a lot of time together and then they fall in love with each other. And then that's the book. I know things happen, but it was just kind of boring. And so I only gave this one 2 stars. It was also way too fucking long. It was too long. And the male narrator was a man, even though less than half of the book was in the male main character's perspective. And so I don't always love that. It's kind of weird sometimes for me to suspend my disbelief to listen to a grown man say women's thoughts. I don't know, just a weird quirk that I have that I don't always love. Then I read Only When It's Us by Chloe Leese. I gave this book 5 full stars. This was really good. This is about a people whose names I've already forgotten. She is a college soccer player. He is a former college soccer player. He got meningitis during his first summer camp before college started. He lost his hearing. She misses a lecture, has to get the notes from him, doesn't realize that he's deaf, and they kind of clash like that. It's not enemies to lovers because they call themselves frenemies a lot, but I don't think they ever had, aside from their initial meeting, a lot of animosity towards each other. But this was just, it was really good. 5 stars. I liked it a lot. I read Goodnight Beautiful by Amy Malloy. I gave this book 4 stars. It's a thriller about a therapist and the bizarreness of his life and all the shit that happens to him. Basically, he goes missing and his wife is told, because he was a womanizer when he was younger, because his dad ran away from his mom when he was younger. That's all that happened, that he like ran away to be with another woman. So it was hard to listen to shitty police work, to be honest. But I remembered watching one of Kayla's videos where she talks about this and how there are a lot of twists in this that she liked some of them and then didn't like the others. So I did anticipate some of the twists coming, but I still really enjoyed this book. I had to stop for a little bit at the very end because I got a little bit too stressed out while listening at work, and I was like, that's not right. So I picked it down, put it down, picked it back up, and gave it 4 stars. I really like this one. It was probably one of the highest rated thrillers on my read list. I don't know what to call this. The next book that I read was The Kiss Thief by LJ Shen, and I know that there's some shit happening with LJ Shen, but this was just an old arc that I had that I wanted to read. We are following Francesca, who is the daughter of like a mafia boss in Chicago, and her mom's side of the family, I guess, has this old tale where they give their daughters a wooden box that has notes in it. I don't know. It says like, the first man that you kiss will be your husband. If he gives you chocolate, he loves you. That's what they say. So her first kiss, she's been saving it for her childhood love, and then it is stolen by one of her father's biggest detractors, a senator named Wolf. And after he kisses her, he goes to her father and it's like, guess what, I'm gonna marry your daughter. They don't like each other. There was a lot of animosity. That was like 98% of this book. But I gave it 4 stars anyway. Right, up next is a totally ridiculous book, and I don't know how to explain it to you, so I read Denim Vipers by K.A. Knight. I gave this book 4 stars. It was completely ridiculous. I don't want to say stupid, but like one of the strangest things that I've ever read. This is a reverse harem with a woman and 4 men. I think this is a British novel, like set in England, because they call them knickers. which is just a little bit odd to me, but she's basically sold to a gang called the Vipers by her father. They kidnap her, but she kind of fights back. She has like a lot of sexual tension in this book. There is a lot of trigger warnings. This is a very dark romance. There is gun play, knife play, some probably like dubious consent, maybe some consensual non-consent parts. Just a fucking ridiculous book. This was almost too strange to read, but I liked it for as stupid as it was. It was good. I liked it a lot. It was completely ridiculous and in no way realistic, but that's not always what I'm looking for, you know? This will never happen to me, but it was also funny as fuck to read. All right, and then the last book that I read, which I finished last night, is A Curse of Ash and Embers by Joe Spurrier. Spurrier, sorry. So this is a kind of folksy fantasy witch story about a girl named Elodie who gets a letter offering a job that her mom and her stepdad don't really know anything about, but she goes to this witch's house, and this witch is currently dealing with the aftermath of the death of her like witch teacher, and that's basically all this book is, them dealing with the aftermath. There's not a lot of other characters in this book. It wasn't extremely fleshed out. This is the first book in a 2-book series, at least at this point. And it would have made more sense to me if this one was a novella, because I feel like it was just a lot of setting up the world and less character. Anything about the characters was just kind of confusing and not my favorite, but I gave it 3 stars. So that's everything that I read this month. This is a very long video, so I'm going to stop filming this. I hope you enjoyed me filming this video with my very oily face. I had to get fingerprinted today, so that's the only explanation that I have. And my robe, because I like to be comfy. So, goodbye. I'll see you in the next one, and have a good day.